Here.
Kurt.
Here.
Cindy.
Here.
John.
Here.
Mark.
Here.
Bob.
Here.
And Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, we have a full assembly this evening. It's time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, looking for approval of the meeting minutes from May 5th. Entertain a motion for that.
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Lynn and seconded by Member Haverlick to approve the meeting minutes of May 5th. Is there any changes by any of the other assembly members? Seeing none, the minutes for the meeting of May 5th are approved. Now we need amendment or approval of the meeting minutes for this evening, May 19th.
So moved. Second.
Been moved by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Walhooter to approve this evening's minutes. Seeing no, is there any changes? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on with the agenda as set. Public hearing and bid awards. Public hearing on ordinance 2014-8, parks and recreation user fees. Is there anybody in the audience this evening that would like to speak on the park and recreation user fees? Ordinance 2014-8. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next public hearing, and that public hearing is on ordinance 2014-09, camping and recreation areas, or camping and recreation areas. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to that this evening? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to a public hearing on ordinance 2014-10. Borough budget and setting millage rate for July 1st, 2014 through June 20th, 2015. The ordinance has been amended to reflect the changes made by the Assembly at the May 5th, 2014 meeting. The ordinance has further been amended to accommodate the purchase of a wheelchair-accessible van for Mountain View Manor. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to participate in the public hearing on ordinance 2014-10? Okay, could you please come to the podium, state your name, who you represent?
This is budget and mill rate included in this, right?
Yeah.
My name's Jerry Merrigan. I'm a homeowner in Service Area 2 up the road there. And I was an ex-charter commissioner, and I just want to comment on the budget, particularly the article in last week's pilot about the budget, where it was saying that due to a supposed decrease in the projected revenue from Service Area 2, you had to raid a contingency fund. And I thought this was kind of interesting because I went back to the petition and looked at what revenues that you expected from the 4 mill area, and that was $184,000. So after the revised assessments, you ended up with $218,000, which most people would look at as a 19% surplus. So how does a surplus become a shortfall? Well, it looks like what happened is that the budget you had was based on taking the preliminary assessment from the assessor before there were any appeals and saying, well, this was where our revenue is going to be. Well, you knew there was going to be a lot of appeals. The city manager was quoted on that in the paper in October, saying you're going to expect an above average number, as you would in any first-time assessment process. To use that number, I mean, we just went through a rather large recession in the U.S. One thing we should have learned is to be wary of using inflated property values. So to use that number, you know it's going to go down. No one's going to come in and appeal, or maybe somebody is, one person, to say, please raise my property assessment. You know, I would like more taxes. But you know that's going to go down. And to use that number in a budget, and then to come out in the paper say, we're having a shortfall, and we are considering maybe raising the mill rate, but we're going to raise this. That is a manufactured deficit. That's not being prudent to use that number in a budget as an expected actual revenue. And all I'm asking you guys is to use, like, you're always going to have these shortfalls and have knee-jerk reactions about raising mill rates if you use unrealistic revenue projections. And one of the things on property values that when I looked at the petition and the transition budget, which I know is a planning document and guidance, but one was you had the land selections, And in the petition, you have $50,000 a year from new revenue every year from the new land selections being sold that came from borough formation. But that's supposedly in the budget started in fiscal year 11 and 12. So now we're like 3 years out. We haven't even selected land. We haven't sold any, much less that. So it's like 150,000 in arrears in the transition budget. So I would think that's real money. That's real stuff. You know, that's what the focus should be. And I think, you know, I know it comes up later on, but the idea of taking some of the 600,000 startup money and hiring consultants for this doesn't really seem appropriate. I would just point out that in the annexation process and the borough process, the annexation process, you hired consultants. You spent 5 years. Consultant prepared a paper on budget versus annexation. You want annexation, and they want. But this, I guess there's some shortage. You focus it on the realistic, revenue sources, and then temper your spending accordingly. It was a little disturbing to see we're considering raising the mill rate before we even got billed for one. And I know it's just a discussion thing in the paper, but that's the kind of knee-jerk reaction we don't need. We need some more deterministic method of setting the budget and realistic numbers.
Can you get to your point, Jerry? We have a real busy
I'm
agenda
sorry, yeah, okay.
this evening, so I'm not trying to cut anybody off. But
I got, even with my bad vision, I got the language.
yeah, well, but we get your point, and I don't know that maybe the city managers can respond to this. I've been gone for a month, and I did keep up on that, and I did see that we had to readjust the contingency money, and just like you said, because there was when the appeals came in and they readjusted the money we were really going to get,
I guess the point was
cut that in half.
The expected revenues you had in your petition, you got more than what you expected in the petition. You got 20% more. It wasn't a shortfall. You used a number that wasn't even finalized yet because you know it's going to come down after the appeals. You should have probably stuck with the more conservative number and stayed with that, and your budget would have been fine. You wouldn't have derated any funds. That would have been a more realistic thing to do.
Well, let's not start bantering back and forth, or it's going to get totally out of line. So thank you for your testimony. So is there anybody else that wants to participate in the public hearing on ordinance 2014-10, borough budget and setting millage rate for this next fiscal year? Okay, seeing none, that public hearing is closed. Looking for authorization to purchase a wheelchair accessible van from EK Bus Sales for the total not to exceed $63,777.36. Excuse me. EK Bus Sales is an equipment provider listed on the Washington State Vehicle Procurement Contract and is being used because the State of Alaska equipment contract does not list a vehicle that would meet requirements. Purchase of the vehicle without a competitive bid process is allowed by Municipal Code Section 4.04.040G. So I'd entertain a motion to authorize the borough to go forward with this purchase.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Haverlick to authorize the purchase of the wheelchair accessible van not to exceed $63,777.36. Any discussion by the Assembly? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is visitors' views related to the agenda, and Member Haverlick has a letter from a gentleman that couldn't make it tonight, and this might be the appropriate time to read that. Can you do it in 2 minutes? Because I think I'm going to put a 2-minute time limit on it.
Okay, I'll read it quick.
No, I'm just,
A neighbor across the street, Dave Randrup, requested that I read this letter. He went out for his helmet IFQs this afternoon, so he couldn't be here. It said, Borough Formation has presented a platform for Petersburg residents to formally collaborate with other agencies to control decisions upon impacts of natural resources. A test of borough effectiveness will be the current University of Alaska land management timber sales of South Midcoff Island and Wrangell Narrows East. The Central Southern Southeast Alaska Plan of November 2000 defines the utilization of these parcels as follows. Wrangell Narrows, management intent. Parcel is to be managed for dispersed recreation and to maintain scenic qualities. Protect wildlife habitat values, particularly critical deer winter habitat. Maintain the integrity of large block of old growth set aside by the USFS along Blind Slough. Resources uses: dispersed recreation, habitat, wildlife, scenic resources, timber. 3. Related information: community harvest area for deer hunters using boat access. B. Forms the backdrop for cruise ships, Alaska Marine Highway charter boats, and personal watercraft viewing. C. Deer use lower slopes extensively in part because this side of Midcoff Island receives less snow than adjacent areas. D. Receives considerable use by moose and contains good marten habitat. The USFS rates forested lands immediately adjacent to both sides of this unit as the highest value deer winter range. F. The USFS has designated a small old growth reserve adjacent to this unit. G. The parcel is surrounded by USFS VCU number 4480, which is ranked as having the highest sensitivity disturbance of subsistence use areas for communities in southeast Alaska. South Midcoff Island management intent. Parcels to be managed consistent with the legislation established the Ernie Hagen public use area. 2. Resources use: dispersed and marine-related recreation. B. Critical deer winter range. C. Waterfall concentration area and adjacent tidelands. D. Community habitat area. 3. Related information is a continuation of the critical deer winter range on South Midcoff Island. B. The shoreline is a winter waterfall concentration area, community harvest area for salmon, and commercial Dungeness crab harvest area. As a lifelong resident of Petersburg, I hope you can appreciate my concern of these two areas and their continued benefits to future generations.
Thank you, John. So that was from Dave Randrup. Any other views related to tonight's agenda? Do you step up the microphone and state your name and who you represent? Can I just get a show of hands to see how many people want to participate, so maybe we don't have to put a stringent timeline on it? I think we're going to limit it to 2 minutes then. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members, for this opportunity to speak. I am Suzanne Wood, and I am representing myself here tonight. I attended by conference over 4.5 years the Board of Forestry meetings where public safety relating to timber harvest on steep and unstable slopes was discussed. During this period, the same Sea Alaska employee held a seat on the board with very active participation. Later on, a principal from Alcan Forest Products held a seat on the board and voted twice along with the Sea Alaska employee to pass their obligations for public safety off to local zoning ordinances. And finally, a Columbia helicopter principal took an active role with participation on the Board of Forestry's own Landslide Science and Technical Committee, also called S&TC. The current state regional forester in charge of the Petersburg area held a full-time seat on the S&TC that developed the Midcoff Island scoping map. And that's these maps that are in your pile there. She is the individual who signed off sight unseen on the trust timber harvest plan above our homes, Mitkoff Highway and the Tyee Hydroelectric Corridor in June 2006, an area that has since experienced 5 additional natural landslides. She also signed off on the university sale at South Mitkoff, an area of known slide activity, including the September 2012 debris avalanche and log jam that impacted Wilson Creek, cataloged Andromedus water area, and those are the slide photos that you have. Further, our attempt to amend the Forest Resources and Practices Act, FERPA, through HB, that's House Bill 91, was stopped when the state forester who chairs the Board of Forestry attached a fiscal note which effectively killed the bill in the House Resources Committee at the end of the 2012 session. All 4 of these Board of Forestry members effectively stopped any further attempt by the public to prevent slides that could impact the public safety. Even though they actively participated in the discussions and final decisions that led to this point, they are still consciously ignoring public safety above Mitkoff Highway. It is my understanding that the university is also aware of the landslide hazard potential on their property. I believe the question now is, after 4.5 years of in-depth study of the landslide issue, why does the South Mitkoff timber plan still seem to be moving forward without so much as a professional risk analysis of potential slide impacts to highway traffic, fish habitat, or water quality? Could it be that everyone involved to this point believes the lack of local zoning ordinances will make the Petersburg Borough the only party that will face the consequences if a citizen is harmed for the potential of increased slide activity due to logging? Are we the deer in the headlights? The proposed university sale on the Wrangell Narrows is located along Alaska's scenic byway. While the SNTC mapping does not show potential landslide hazard to the public on the university's Narrows property, the fact is it is mapped and does show steep slopes in excess of 67% grade. There is already one slide there that is partially visible from the Narrows. That is a pretty good indication that these slopes are also unstable. Just up the Narrows, amidst the various mostly summer lodge community, there exists evidence of massive blowdown. Neighboring structures lost dozens of trees when high winds coursed the Narrows and plowed through recent timber harvest openings in the once intact canopy. Wrangell Narrows and Keene Channel property owners may be further adversely affected by the university's proposed timber harvest. How has it come to pass, after all the Board of Forestry discussion on this issue, that Alaska is still the only coastal region north of the U.S.-Mexico border that has no mention of public safety anywhere in its Forest Resources and Practices Act? I always assumed that local zoning ordinances were to supplement state and federal regulations, not shoulder the... I just have a little bit, just one other sentence. I always assumed that local zoning ordinances were to supplement state and federal regulations, not shoulder the whole burden of logging unstable slopes within municipal or borough boundaries. I guess I was wrong. Thank you for this opportunity to express my views. I am hopeful the borough strongly considers co-signing the letter being presented tonight from the city of Kupreanof. Thank you for giving me this time.
Anybody else like to speak to this? George, can you please step up, state your name and who you represent?
Should I speak?
Yeah, can you please step, yeah.
I suppose I really should introduce myself. My name is George Rice. I was a teacher in the local schools and owned Petersburg Marine Logging Supply. As a matter of fact, I sold a chainsaw to Mr. Wood's father so he could cut down trees in Thomas Bay. I sold a lot of chainsaws to various people. I also sold Mercury outboard motors, Homelite, various items Homelite had to sell, Mercruiser drives, anything that you could, Boston whaler boats, and a number of items. Now, the letter is, as I'm reading it, is a reply to an article in the paper, an ad, and I sent it to the local press to have it. I first visited Petersburg in 1958. I have to have glasses and hearing aids too, so speak loudly when you talk to me. With my wife and 3 children and another couple, Don and Leila Pearsall. We had a 21-foot outboard cruiser, and Don and Leila had a 23 outboard cruiser. We were living in Shelton, Washington at the time, and Don and Leila in Edmond, Washington. We had come to Petersburg to see a good friend, Rod Bain, a member of the band The Brothers, who was the teacher principal of the Petersburg Elementary School. We brought with us a 16-millimeter film camera to document our trip. While filming the 4th of July boat race in Wrangell Narrows in 1958, a new clear cutting at the mouth of Petersburg Creek is clearly visible. Not a pleasant sight to the anti-logging crowd. Take a look some 56 years later at the clear cutting. In 1960, I obtained a teaching job in Petersburg. I saw that no one was apparently living on Sasby Point. I found who owned the property and bought it. The family moved to Sasby Point in July of 1960. The area that now calls itself Kupernof was then known as West Petersburg. The people living there had had a good road constructed that extended from the old Petersburg Cemetery to the Ames property at the mouth of Petersburg Creek. The road construction material came from Sasby Island by a bridge that had been constructed. Among other things the road was to transport bodies from the government dock to the old Petersburg Cemetery. The Fred Birch family had an old Model A Ford that they used for a period of years to drive to the government dock where they kept their boat. They finally moved the boat to Petersburg and used the skiff at high tide to go to town when we lived on Sasby Point. During the time we lived on Sasby Point, the people living in West Petersburg docked their skiffs or boats at the government dock and used the road to walk to their residence. When I was teaching, I took my students to the government dock and then used the road to the trail that the U.S. Forest Service had constructed to the top of Petersburg Mountain. All went well until the arrival of Bob Body to West Petersburg, who decided he didn't like roads. He actually forced the Gilpin children, who had come to the government dock by the school boat, to walk in water at high tide to get to their home, which was past his property. The residents of Kupernof brought a lawsuit, which they won, to have the road permanently closed. Now, for the people of Kupernof who are so worried about slides, I suggest you look in your own backyard. In either 1963 or 64, a large slide occurred above Kupernof. No logging had occurred anywhere on the mountain above Kupernof. I suggest that you take some of the money that you receive from the state each year and find out how you can alleviate future slides that could bury Kupernof. Large landslides do occur in southeast Alaska.
George,
Thomas
can you
Bay
wrap
is
it up?
known as the Bay of Death by the local native population because of a landslide that buried a large Tlingit village. This occurred long before there was any logging in Alaska. Several landslides have occurred along Radical Narrows in recent times. These slides are not due to logging. I suggest that you read your own ad on page 17. A community harvest for deer hunters using boat access. Now, for you Kupernof residents who don't believe in roads, that may be true. But if I want to hunt deer, I will drive the road in my vehicle and not worry about tides or storms coming up. This road, called the Mitkoff Highway, that goes from Petersburg to Dry Strait, was not built as a logging road, although a lot of logging did occur along the road in later years. This road was constructed because many people in Petersburg at the time of statehood wanted to be able to drive to the South 48.
Are you just about done, George?
What?
Are you just about done? We've got a lot
Yes,
of people
I
who
am.
want to speak. Okay.
Just a little bit here. Our state representative at the time was able to get money appropriated and road construction was started. Had he been able to obtain the money for the high bridge before the environmentalists took over, you could be driving to the South 48 if you wished. I really doubt that the Hells Angels would have used the road to move to Petersburg, as some road opponents claimed. Now, as to deer populations, I suggest you read the Coronation Island report and look at the Brown Bear Islands, where logging has occurred, and see the real effects which wolf population has rather than logging on deer populations. I am sending the ad placed in the local paper, as well as a letter to Governor Parnell to see if he thinks the money the state sends to Kupernof is well spent. Before the Borough Assembly stops employment for many, I think you need to drive the entire road system on Mitkoff Island. See how many slides you can spot caused by logging. Take a careful look at the many benefits from schools to sewage systems that the city received from these logging operations. This looks like Act 2 of when the mental health people wanted to send some timber and it was successfully blocked. Mental Health was supposed to trade land with the Forest Service for land at the far end of the island. Obviously, Mental Health, this will not allow you to sell any timber if this group has their way.
Okay, thanks, George. From now, the rest of the testimonies, I think we're going to have to keep it to 4 minutes. No, you're good. Thank you. Otherwise, we're going to be here till midnight, I think. So I'll just raise my hand when there's 30 seconds left or get your attention, and then we'll go from there. Neva, do you want to speak?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I hate to cut anybody off, but if we don't, I guess.
Well, now, I came to Petersburg before he did, and across there, on top of that building, this electric building, there was a Petersburg sign that had a fish hook and an axe for our Mark. Now, I love you all because I know you, and I watched you grow up. You played with my kids. But I would like to say I think we should cut those trees, but I'll tell you why. Okay, here we go. I'll make it fast.
Thank you.
How about it in danger as you presume? I don't think so. You take example of Three Lakes Road. That was clear cut and everything has returned beautifully. You have access to good fishing, good hunting, hiking, berry picking, good roads that the loggers built. More deer and moose came over to our island when that cut was there because they wanted that new foliage and that new green. That's when we got the moose. I was here. Okay, and then, all right, as Banana Point doesn't appear to be that thick with trees close to Banana Point, we should let them go ahead and do it. Maybe they'll build us a dock that we need so desperately. We've been trying to get for how many years out there where that Banana Point is. Okay, many of you get your living from a natural resource, such as fishing. No one attacks you about going fishing or threatens your livelihood. So why pick on people that want their living from a natural resource, such as logging? We live in the largest forest in the USA. Aren't I right? You there? Okay. We need to use all our natural resources, such as timber, mining, fishing, farming, and oil and energy. America has a terrible debt, and we need to have more money. And how do you get it? You get jobs. We need that commerce. When a person gets a check, IRS gets some of it. And the more jobs we make, the more they'll get, and hopefully they'll lower the national debt. And one other thing, too. Most of you live in wooden houses, so why are you complaining about the logging? And most of your furniture is made out of wood. All right, you know when you complain, you cost the taxpayers money. We need that commerce for jobs, and we need those logs to stay in Alaska or the United States and not go to some foreign country like they did the last time we did it. We need to keep those jobs here in Petersburg. Okay, now, that's what I've got to say, Alice. I love you, even if you are a tree hugger.
Eva, thank you for your testimony. Yeah, I guess we can't stop what people say, but it'd be nice if there was no poking back and forth at one another. Just because you're on one side of a position, you don't have to, call someone a name, I guess. So who would like to speak next? Dave?
I'm Dave Kinsinger, and I've lived in and I want to just address one of the timber sales, and that's the one by Wrangell, that's on Wrangell Narrows. And I'm not making a pro-logging stance. I'm not making an anti-logging stance. What I'm going to make is an economic stance. When I bought my property down there in the early 80s, the parcel that the university now has, at that time I asked the state what you're going to do with it. And I actually saw a plat map where they had 45 lots on the beach, 45 back lots behind it, very similar to the rest of the subdivision in that area. And so I said, why aren't you going to put this up for sale right now? He said, well, we will, but it'll probably be in 15 to 20 years. Okay, the mid-1990s, the state of Alaska gave that property to the University of Alaska so that they could conduct a land disposal sale. At the same time, they gave all the adjacent property that was owned by the state, the deeds to that, any of that property that people were still making payments on, which I was at the time, and any of the property that had gone back to the state that was subsequently resold to the university. So that's what that property was originally intended for. And actually, they did get another parcel, which they did put into a subdivision, and they subsequently sold, called the Crystal Mountain Sale, I believe, where you have a place, council assembly member now. So, if you take that property today, pardon? Oh, sorry. If you took that property today, and if you use the current assessed value on it, that property is worth between $3 and $4 million. You guys just assessed the property down there, so we have a pretty current idea what the value of that property is down there. The thing about this property is it's level, it's next to the beach, and most important, it has all-weather access. There is not another parcel in the entirety of Southeast Alaska of its size that has similar characteristics. This is a valuable piece of property. The university, their mandate through their land program is to generate income. And my feeling is that they have overlooked the amount of income they could receive from this property through a land sale. The university has a mission to educate our kids. Well, guess what? We have a mission very similar to that here in the borough. And guess what happens when that property goes from the university to an individual? They have to pay property tax on it. Within 10 years, 20% of the beachfront properties on that parcel will more than likely have residents or cabins or homes on them, and more to follow. It's a sizable amount of money that will be left on the table. And so what I feel is this assembly should point out to the university that we have a common objective in trying to, one, educate our kids and helping them fulfill their mission, which is to receive the highest dollar value for their piece of property. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Anybody else like to speak? State your name and who you represent, please.
My name's Tom Marsh, and I'm representing myself. I agree with Dave 100%. I think he had some great points. I also think that logging would be good. We moved here in 1980, and I can remember climbing over the stumps and the clear cuts on Three Lakes Loop Road, and now they're gone. My wife, when I brought her to town for the first time, we drove out there, and I told her that was a clear cut, and she said, "What? No way." We had to get out of the car and look at the stumps. I didn't know it was a clear cut over at Petersburg Creek. I've seen some stumps over there, but I think it's appropriate that we're having this discussion during a time when we're talking about budgets. This is a revenue stream. I don't understand how we can talk about raising mill rates or sales tax or anything else and turn down an economic opportunity. As a city council, it is your responsibility to look out for our economic future, our jobs, and our resources, to manage them wisely. To manage them wisely. Not just shut them down. And I don't understand why we would even contemplate that. If we're concerned about saving trees, maybe we should stop filing lawsuits. There's bound to be a few clear cuts in that paperwork. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else like to speak? Eric, would you?
My name is Eric Lee, and my statement would just consist of one sentence, and that is that I would encourage the Assembly to support the letter that the City of Kupreanof has formed, to join with the City of Kupreanof in that letter. So, thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Mike?
Good evening. My name is Mike Steinbrook. I'm a Borough resident. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. I'm very appreciative that the Borough tonight is discussing these two University of Alaska timber contracts. I've listened to the commentary on KFSK and the Borough Business program today. I think it's a pretty important subject, as we can see tonight. I would encourage the Assembly to join with the City of Kupreanof and send a letter requesting that these sales not be finalized. I think there's several good reasons for this, including the unstable slope, deer habitat, and recreational opportunities. I think the strong voice of the borough should be put to use on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. I'm sure there's more. Who would like to speak next? Ed?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Assembly members. My name is Ed Wood, and I'm representing myself here tonight. First of all, I'd like to say that I've only contested one timber sale since my parents brought me to Alaska 60 years ago this December at the age of 2. That was the proposed Alaska Mental Health Trust logging on demonstrably unstable slopes that was planned above my and my friends' and neighbors' property from 4 Mile to about 7 Mile Metcalf Highway. I have not commented for or against either university timber sale, nor am I doing so now. I do suggest that the Assembly Borough consider signing the letter for potential liability reasons. I would like to give the Assembly a little background on state timber harvest regulations that you may or may not be aware of. The Alaska Forest Resources and Practices Act, or FERPA, is a controlling authority in Alaska for all timber sales over 10 acres on state, municipal, and private lands, with one exception, and I'll get to that in a moment. I initially submitted a proposal to amend FERPA that would address public safety within inhabited landslide areas across Alaska on September 10, 2007, to the state forester, which led to a lengthy review process before the Division of Forestry's board. Susie and I never missed an Alaska Board of Forestry meeting by teleconference in 4.5 years where the landslide issue was discussed. During this time, the board initiated its Landslide Science and Technical Committee to first scope out landslide hazards, specifically areas either inhabited or easily accessible by the public, such as Metcalf Highway, and then to update its regulations. During the final 2 meetings, the board twice voted by unanimous consent to pass the state's obligations to manage timber harvests on unstable slopes within inhabited areas to local zoning ordinances. This is the exception that I referenced a moment ago. I don't know if the Division of Forestry officially notified Petersburg or the other 10 communities or boroughs between Ketchikan and Cordova that have scientifically mapped landslide hazard areas within their boundaries of this decision, but they should have. What the board basically did was make communities solely responsible for regulating logging on unstable slopes within their boundaries that could have public safety ramifications. The board also decided against adopting regulations designed to minimize the impacts of timber harvest-related slide activity on roads that are easily accessible to the public, partly because, as the state forester said during the March 30th, 2012 House Resources Committee hearing on our bill, House Bill 91, the roaded areas have been logged already. However, this is not true in regard to the university's South Metcalf sale. I think that it is not unreasonable for the Assembly to ask the university to suspend their timber sale at least until they put forth their plans to mitigate the increased slide potential related to timber harvest on their property, identified as a landslide hazard area, for borough review. The Board of Forestry twice deliberately made a conscious decision to not amend FERPA to include public safety, even as it is bound by law to minimize or prevent significant adverse effects of soil erosion and mass wasting on fish habitat and water quality. The trout means more than somebody else, than a human. Believe it or not, the Division of Forestry will claim that it has no legal ability to consider potential increased slide activity due to timber harvest on the downslope traffic on Metcalf Highway because the Alaska Forest Resources and Practices Act lacks the authority to do so, because that is exactly what they did when the TLO was going to log above our homes and highway. it was the Board of Forestry that decided local zoning ordinances are to be the controlling authority for public safety in cases like this, and not the Division of Forestry. With the proximity of the sale to the Midcoff Highway near the Banana Point boat launching ramp, which at times is pretty busy, including with school-related travel activities between Petersburg, Wrangell, and Kaufman Cove, it might be prudent for the borough attorney to look into the borough's liabilities on this issue. It's difficult to not question the constitutionality of the Department of Natural Resources, ignoring the section that references resource development in the same sentence as maximum use consistent with the public interest. That seems more of a duty of the state and not of local zoning ordinances.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else like to speak to visitors' views related to the agenda? Becky?
Hi, my name is Becky Knight. Just for the record, this is from the 2013 Sealaska Annual Report. Quote, during the periods presented above and prior periods, tax depletion arising from Sealaska's ANCSA resources has offset all other federal and state taxable income, and Sealaska has not paid federal or state income taxes except those taxes related to the activities of certain controlled subsidiaries operating outside of Alaska. Sealaska will need to earn approximately $60 million in taxable income within the United States of America to utilize its estimated realizable deferred tax asset related to state and federal tax jurisdictions prior to the expiration of its federal and state net operating losses in 2033. Okay, and I probably had a lot more I wanted to say tonight, but due to the time limit, I am the board member on a conservation group, this Greater Southeast Alaska Conservation Community, and we retain the services of a well-known, respected geomorphologist, Dr. Lee Benda, and he wrote a statement for us, and I'd like to read that. Dear Ms. Knight, GSAC has requested a professional opinion with regards to a proposed timber harvest in the vicinity of the Banana Point boat launch area in southern Metcalf Island. For the record, I am a licensed geologist, engineering geologist in California and Washington, specializing in slope stability science. I have a master's and PhD degrees from the Department of Geological Sciences, University of Washington, specializing in slope stability and its impacts. I have over 20 years of experience working in the field of geomorphology. More generally, that includes evaluating slope instability for state and federal agencies and the private sector. In 2013, I was part of a team contracted with applying the NetMap analysis system to all of Southeast Alaska that included slope stability predictions funded by the Tongass National Forest. I've also been involved with similar analyses across all of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Northern California, funded by the U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, Environmental Protection Agency, and others. I've worked for both agencies and for private companies because my analyses are considered unbiased. He said I would provide the same geotechnical analysis to either party. Under the present request by GSAC, I am unable to provide a highly detailed analysis of the potential effects of timber harvest on slope stability because the state of Alaska has not provided sufficient information from which to do so. Thus, my professional opinion is in this case is of a general nature and should be considered preliminary until additional information is provided. Our slope stability evaluation, and it's in the form of maps I have here, include the area of proposed timber harvest in southern Metcalf Island, NetMap's slope stability evaluation focusing on shallow landslides and debris flows is well suited to the Metcalf Island landscape. The analysis using U.S. Forest Service 20-meter digital elevation models, DEM for short, clearly shows many areas of potential instability in the proposed timber harvest area located directly above the highway and the boat launch. Indeed, there's been documented landslides in this area not related to any human activity and related to past timber harvest, providing certain validation of the predictions. Specifically, the process of shallow landsliding is sensitive to the reduction of tree root strength when conifer trees are cut, the roots die. Hence, timber harvest on steep slopes can lead to accelerated landsliding and debris flows, a conclusive finding from published studies in Alaska, British Columbia, and the lower 48 states. I understand that helicopter logging is proposed in some locations in the proposed timber harvest area. This activity has the potential to conduct harvest to avoid hazardous landslide-prone hillsides. But apparently this cannot be evaluated since the state of Alaska has not provided such information either in the form of maps or in plan descriptions.
Becky, can I ask you to wrap it up, Becky, please?
Okay, I've not been asked to offer an opinion regarding the notion that trees by themselves, I've also been asked to offer an opinion regarding the notion that trees by themselves exert a weight on the slope, a condition that can be further impacted by the wind, and that in combination can induce instability, landsliding. Thus, removing trees from steep hillsides may actually increase stability of the hillside. This spurious idea has long been debunked as evidenced by dozens of studies. And I have the full text here if you'd like to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak to views made of the agenda? Harold?
My name is Harold Madolin, and to begin with, I'd like to blow a little bit of time here to say that you guys are getting paid to be here, benefits. We're not. I think that you should listen to the public for as long as it takes. Now, not necessarily me, you can cut me off, but just for the benefit, I'd rather hear what everybody has to say all the time. If you guys have to be here till midnight, you know, I realize meetings get long and it gets tedious with all those long-winded people yammering away, but I think that's the public process.
This isn't a view related to the agenda, I don't think, but I appreciate your...
Okay, I intend to speak to the same issue as the people in front of me. I'm going to, first off, I'm going to give you my Paul Bowen's high school geology class free geologic assessment is any slope over 38 degrees, about like this, or approximately 50%, is likely to slide. That's the angle of repose. The front of a sand dune is like that, a scree slope on a mountainside, a hill with trees on it. Sooner or later, they will all fall down. We've seen this along Scow Bay. As often and noteworthy in areas that weren't logged as we've seen where they were logged. But sooner or later, they will all fall down. Along the shores of Puget Sound, you'll see houses sitting on the beach that fell off the bluffs that they built on for the good view. But it was a steep slope. So anyway, as far as objections to timber harvest, of which I've heard many over the years, for the most part, parties raising objections to it don't object to timber harvest per se. It's to some kind of specific problem related to the particular sale. It's habitat for the Queen Charlotte Island goshawk, like the ones that try to get my chickens in town. A very rare, possibly endangered animal. It's the deer and the extremely endangered, rare, quite common Alexander archipelago wolves that depend on the deer for their prey, and the population of them will collapse if the deer population collapses, so on. All these things. Or if the ground is steep, it's going to slide. If the ground is flat, it's in some kind of a watershed that's going to be adversely impacted. Now, one argument that used to be really common that of late I haven't heard because we've had steadily increasing salmon runs, record salmon runs, is that it's going to destroy salmon habitat. And I would challenge anyone to show me a stream in southeast Alaska that has been wiped out by, the salmon run has been wiped out by logging. I'm sure someone will point it out if there is one. The only salmon stream I know of that's extinct, look right out the window. But that's due to urbanization or because we're such great fishermen. So anyway, I'm used to hearing all these things and the same general group of people attacking all of these sales, and these ones are no different. I'll say what I see of that South Mikoff sale is, first of all, looking at the map that the taxpayers of Kupernoff so pleasantly provided us with, it'd be a really bad place to have a land disposal and sell land, and anybody would be a fool to buy land there because it's probably, it looks like it's over a 50% or 38-degree slope. So it might slide down on your house. No one should build houses there. Think about that if you ever zone that area. Anyone would be a fool to buy land there because the land might slide down on their house. So it looks to me like the highest and best use of the property is timber harvest. And a lot of similar areas along Metcalf Highway have been harvested. I believe the method that they're talking about is helicopter selective logging. That would minimize soil disturbance, and I have no objection to that sale. And I learned about this in February, several months ago. Been aware of this for a long time. I'm shocked that it's come as a surprise to some people, but I'm hopefully people that were concerned got some public comment in. As far as the Wrangell Narrows sale, I hate to give away my deer hunting spots, but I've hunted deer up there. Got the biggest buck that I ever got on Metcalf Island there. My wife got the first deer that she ever went out and shot all by herself and packed it out of the woods there. I've been up to that property boundary, and it's quite a ways up the hill. There's a lot of timber in there that could probably be helicopter selective logging, flown out. It would. I agree with Dave that probably the highest and best use of that is land disposal along the beach. But most of those lots only go in 400 feet or something like that. I'm sure that they can log it back there and still sell the property. I don't know what the effect with that on the scenic byway would be.
Can I ask you to wrap it up, please?
Sure. I know when that scenic byway was created, there was clear cuts visible from one end of Wrangell Narrows to the other, and now most of them have grown in. So I don't think this would be a clear cut, but I don't know what the effect of a bunch of new houses on the beach would be on the scenic byway. But anyway, I would urge you guys not to try to stop this and just let it go ahead, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Harold. Anybody else like to speak to views related to the agenda this evening? No, that's it. Okay, thank you all for your testimony, and I guess I counted more hands than that. I shouldn't have been short on the clock, but would you like to speak, Dave?
I would be speaking to the agenda item or that? Or is
This is views related to the agenda.
Yeah.
The next item on our agenda is
So,
views unrelated to the agenda.
I mean, in terms of the agenda itself, should I be speaking now or
To the letter
or
from
to
Kupernock?
Yeah.
Yeah, this would be a proper time because it's on our agenda this evening. So when we get to the discussion as an assembly, we won't be taking testimony.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Jensen and Assembly members. My name is David Beebe, and I'm here representing the City Council of Kupernock. Last year in this very room, we heard one of the principal arguments in favor of borough formation was that the broader community would have a stronger regional voice in natural resource and development issues. Tonight's agenda item is the first significant test of the validity of that argument. The stakes are high as we consider two inescapable consequences of old-growth timber extraction on Mitkoff and Kupernoff Islands. The first consequence is logging on unstable slopes as they relate to public safety on our highways and at developed, highly popular recreational facilities. The second consequence being further loss of critical deer winter habitat necessary for restoring Sitka black-tailed deer populations, which crashed over 40 years ago on Mitkoff Island, and to this day have yet to be restored. There's only one piece of legislation which governs state forest practices, but it mentions neither deer nor humans subject to landslides caused by state-approved forest practices. Alaska distinguishes itself as the last state to stubbornly refuse to address this long-standing predicament of public safety. The recent tragedy in Oso, Washington, in which 40 people were killed by a logging-induced landslide in an area with a long history of documented landslides, serves as an object lesson in the failure of democratic governments to function as they should. There are many factors influencing these failures of government to function in the public trust, but on the most basic level, it arises from the failure to inform. The tragedy of Oso, Washington was in part
a failure of elected representatives to inform themselves and the public. At the next level, the tragedy represented the failure of government agencies to apply a wealth of existing scientific information to regulatory authority and policy decisions. The newly formed Petersburg Borough is understandably challenged by a myriad set of new responsibilities. We appreciate how these University of Alaska timber sales could have easily been missed, or assumed that the state of Alaska would properly manage its responsibilities, but this is likely what happened in Oso, Washington. If it could happen there, it could surely happen here. While human lives are irreplaceable, legal experts predict each fatality in Oso will result in court damages of between $5 and $10 million, and that doesn't even include physical property damages. So let's do our level best as a borough to keep a close watch on a fallible government process which doesn't even have in place basic rules of forestry practices on unstable slopes providing for public safety. On its most basic level, the function of government should be to provide for public safety and upholding the public trust doctrine in the very activities government regulates. The public trust doctrine is solidly embedded in Alaska's Constitution. It's the principle that certain resources are preserved for public use and that the government is required to maintain them for the public's reasonable use. Petersburg's Elder Lee was a delegate to our exemplary Constitution. Petersburg's Gordon Jensen was a distinguished chairman of the Joint Boards of Fisheries and Game, which recognized the failure of the Forest Resources Practices Act to provide for sustainable yield of wildlife, as Article 8, Section 4 requires. So we have a problem here. It has been recognized in 1980 by the Joint Boards of Fish and Game that FERPA needed to be amended to deal with wildlife management. And the Board of Game can't do this.
Can I ask you to wrap it up, Dave? It's been 2 minutes, so.
The City of Krupinoff would like to help play an active role in our newly formed borough to prevent missing any more of these comment deadlines, which have profound consequences to our borough residents. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak to visitors' views related to this evening's agenda? You already, is it on the same subject? Well, I don't feel I should give you more time even when I've cut other people off, but thank you. Anybody else like to speak to visitors' views related to the agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none. We're moving to the next item on the agenda. It's visitors' views unrelated to this evening's agenda. Is there anybody who would like to speak to anything that's not on this evening's agenda? Okay, seeing none. The next item on the agenda is Jason Anderson from the District Ranger. Mr. Anderson will update the Assembly on various Forest Service activities. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Mayor Jensen and Assembly members. Really had two things I wanted to cover tonight. One is in fact somewhat related to the issues and concerns that are coming forward with the two university sales. The Petersburg Ranger District has been working on the Mitkoff Island timber sale project. We're doing an environmental analysis for a fairly large project on the island spread out over many acres. I think you're going to hear in the future very similar concerns about habitat loss and or soil concerns, landslide issues associated with that project. My only encouragement in coming tonight is to offer up to the Assembly to really look into the details of the actual prescriptions, the acres, and the information available at a site-specific level. As you get into the analysis that we're performing, and again, I'm not sure if that information is available from the university, I think you'll find that while generally speaking there are areas, oversteep and slopes, et cetera, that have some risk of landslide, it's the site-specific information when you go out and walk the ground that dictates whether or not that risk is high or low. The agency has a process by which it'll respond to those risk evaluations before making a decision on which units to actually put forward. When it comes to habitat conditions across the island, I think you're going to see very similar concerns come forward on the Forest Service projects, and I would look to, again, the prescriptions and the actual treatment of the landscape condition from the proposed action as you weigh in on what the Assembly's position is going to be. while you'll see a 28 million board foot timber sale proposed from the Forest Service, it's spread out over 4,000 acres. On average, that's less than a log truck load off of each acre. Over 3,000 acres of that is partial harvest. In other words, most of the stand remaining will be there when it's over. The structural integrity of the forest stand is intact after harvest. This isn't a 4,000 acre clear cut. In fact, a lot of the concerns and the individuals and organizations who brought those concerns forward have helped shape that proposed action to address specifically the habitat concerns and habitat soils issues and other activities that are of concern from timber sales. So when the time comes, that analysis should be out later this summer. If the Assembly would like more information or would like to look into that, I would encourage you to do so, and it may actually be a reasonable template for you to explore your position on the South Mitkoff University sales. The other topic I wanted to bring up tonight is actually for the near future. Tomorrow evening, the Forest Service will be hosting a meeting to talk about recreation in and around the Mitkoff area, and specifically the Petersburg Ranger District. As some of you may have read in the paper over the last couple of months, the Forest Service has been responding to some pretty significant downturns in recreation dollars as allocated from Congress. We understand the direct economic impact that has on communities as the Forest Service manages for recreation economy and recreation outlets for its residents and visitors. Fewer budget dollars to respond to that management, to those management needs results in an impact to the communities. And so the idea for tomorrow evening was to gather up with those who are interested and start talking about what it is the district is going to be able to respond to in the future, what opportunities we might try to capitalize on, where we might see some opportunities for increased partnering to try and help protect some of the resources, some of the recreation amenities that have been built up over the years. I would encourage anybody from the Assembly or those that you have contact with to come and participate. I think from an economic perspective, recreation jobs and recreation-based tourism in Southeast Alaska is a huge economic driver, on par with fisheries, on par with timber, one that would be well worth our time and attention, and I'm hoping to get some good turnout for that. Some specific things that will come, you're going to see some cabin closures in the near future. 2 on the Petersburg Ranger District have already been sort of named, and we've gone through a process for that, the DeBoer Lake cabin on the mainland, and the potential closure of the Harvey Lake cabin as well. We're looking at options to try and avoid closure of the Harvey Lake cabin thanks to the efforts of PIA, Petersburg Indian Association, but as yet we haven't figured out what that's going to look like. The reality is with the budget cuts we were seeing, though, those 2 cabins, having been very, very low use, were fairly easy decisions. Some of the more difficult decisions to come may include recreation facilities, cabins, or trails that are of much more importance to the communities. And so not necessarily specific to Petersburg, but across Southeast, we're going to have to make some tough decisions about what we can afford to maintain, what we can afford to continue to invest in. So would encourage anyone in the audience as well as the Assembly to come over tomorrow night, 7 o'clock at the Forest Service office, and would be happy to come up with any additional information afterwards and keep the Assembly apprised of what's going on.
Oh, thank you for your information, Jason. Any questions of Mr. Anderson?
I do have one question. I would love to go to the meeting. I may not be able to do that because of other obligations, but will you have any printed information I could pick up?
Yeah, in fact, we'll probably have a series of, I think the topic is robust enough that we won't be able to cover it in just a few hours without putting people to sleep. So ultimately we'd like to have a series of different discussions to really get us around opportunities, short-term risks, long-term challenges, those kind of questions. But yeah, we'll make some print, and we've been talking with the pilot about trying to get some good publicity on it as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Jason. John?
Jason, I was listening to the story out of Ketchikan about these meetings, and the one thing that sounded kind of interesting, they said for places that had a lot of support, that even if you didn't have money, it's possible to have volunteer groups or someone like that. Is this part of your discussion for tomorrow night?
Yeah, ultimately trying to figure out what opportunities exist, what interest there is within the community to try and bolster up what the Forest Service can't do. Ultimately I have a hard time coming to the community or to the public asking for handouts. You're already paying taxes, you're already investing in those resources. The question is, if there's a particular interest in trying to help leverage those resources, what are our options to do? So if volunteer is genuinely interested, or if there's an interest in volunteerism, we'd be happy to look at where it can fit. There are some things that may not be a good fit for volunteerism. For instance, we probably won't put somebody on the brusher to go brush roads. Yeah. However, if there's an interest in some trail maintenance or trail construction, for another good example, off-road vehicles, there's a small but active group of off-road vehicle enthusiasts in the community. They've actively been working on some motorized trail areas that I think it would be great to get them under a more formal operating agreement and put them in the right path to go forth and do good things under their existing willingness to volunteer. So yeah, those are all options. Formal partnerships with entities, grant income. We can look at a variety of ways to stretch those dollars, but ultimately it's about living within our means and making sure the public is aware of what that is. And if we're off base on what we're assuming is a priority, that's really important feedback. We're making some assumptions based upon what we've seen public react to over 10 or 15 years. If we're off base on that, I'd love to know and change course.
Any other questions of Mr. Anderson? Thanks, Jason,
Thank
for
you.
coming
Yep.
and talking with us. Okay, next item on the agenda is board, commission, and committee reports. And this evening we have a report on the Sales Tax Ordinance Review Committee work by Sue Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Assemblymen and women. This is kind of a long overdue report. We finished our work, I think, the end of February, and we've just had trouble catching everyone here. First of all, I'd like to thank the Sales Tax Review Committee that consisted of Hillary Whitethorn, John Murgis, Fran Jones, Lee Corio, Nancy Strand, and Shelley Pope, and myself. We met all through the fall and winter, and this was our mission statement: to review the sales tax code, to simplify the code and collection procedures, and to generate an equal or greater amount of revenue so the borough doesn't have to decrease services or increase property taxes. We first of all looked at what other communities are doing in the way of sales tax. We discussed many of the options that they use. This included fish boxes, taxing pull tabs, tobacco and alcohol taxes, out-of-town sales, and others. We decided not to recommend the fish box tax. The lodges are just getting used to now having to pay bed taxes since borough formation, but it is a possible source of revenue in the future if you're interested. The pull tab discussion drew quite a crowd. It was decided that pull tab profits do a lot of good things in our community already, such as support for Little League, scholarships, maintenance of the Sons of Norway on the historic register, and other good work. So they figured taxing that wasn't worthwhile. We learned that it's not legal to have an excise tax on alcohol. Juneau does do that, but they were grandfathered in. We cannot do that at this time. Tobacco tax was also discussed, and everyone was in favor of that. PIA came and spoke. They have a smoking cessation specialist, and they really encouraged this. They have found that increasing the cost of a pack of cigarettes particularly discourages young smokers or young people from starting to smoke. And I think the pilot had a very good article about that in the paper last week. We were thinking about this as a way of funding some of the capital needs at the hospital, since smokers tend to end up at the hospital. We hope you will support this and have it on the ballot in October. The toughest decision was what to do about senior citizen sales tax exemption. Most who testified said they are worried about hurting the poor if it was discontinued. Several said it would be more fair to do away with the exemption and lower it for everyone. Then young families wouldn't be subsidizing seniors who really don't need the help. A compromise was proposed to leave this discount for heating, fuel, and the WIC-approved groceries. This would cover the biggest expenses of seniors and have the other benefit of only the grocery stores and the fuel suppliers of having to deal with these senior citizen discount cards. However, the seniors on the committee couldn't support any change. 2 members said they would have to move away if we made any changes. So there is no recommended change except in the proof of residency for the card. We suggest that the staff use PFDs as a proof of residency rather than the Alaska driver's license, which you can get with just 30 days residency. That eliminates people here for 30 days and also lets the state decide who really lives here. The tax cap increase was decided to match Sitka and Wrangell at $1,500. It's now at $1,200, and then you don't pay tax above that. We were not aware at the time of our meeting that the increase to $1,700 that was on the ballot 2 years ago only failed by 2 votes. So you might want to change that number, but we're hoping that will be on the ballot as well. probably a whole sales tax ballot, not a pick and choose, we want this, we want that. Let's see, I just want to say thanks for the opportunity, thanks to the committee, and I'd like to say thanks to Jody Tao, Ann Hurt, and Cammie Peterson from the Finance Office for all their help and assistance. Now I'd like to just give you my personal opinion on some of this. I was very disappointed that the committee couldn't come to any kind of agreement on changes as far as senior tax. That seems to be the biggest thorny issue in town. So now I come to you as a citizen, a taxpayer, a business owner, and a baby boomer. I thought we had a good compromise, limiting the sales tax exemption to seniors to home heating fuel and WIC-approved groceries. It seemed to satisfy what most testimony was asking for, looking out for the senior poor. I would like to ask you to consider placing the question on the ballot this fall. I feel strongly that this is in the best interest of Petersburg. As you know, you only have property tax and sales tax to fund the budget. The senior population is growing faster now that the baby boomers are turning 65. This means a decrease in both sales tax and property tax, as they now qualify for both exemptions. The state mandates the property tax forgiveness up to $150,000 of a home. So you only have control over the sales tax. This has become an entitlement, regardless of need. This compromise has many advantages, one being that only the grocery stores and fuel suppliers have to deal with the exemption cards. That would please many business owners. The WIC-approved groceries are the basics, the milk, eggs, fruit, vegetables, whole grains, etc. This WIC list is already programmed into grocery store registers, so it's easy for them to separate taxable and non-taxable items. And as usual, all seniors will still get their 10% off on Tuesday. That has nothing to do with the sales tax. That is a bonus given by the stores, and most grocery stores all over the country do this on one day of the month, one day of the week, whatever. Since that letter was written, like today on Borough Business, I heard that Mr. Wohlhuter has another plan, phase it out altogether. That's another idea. Wrangell and Haynes have no senior sales tax exemptions. Some other communities in Southeast that do are trying to get rid of it. This exemption was started when the oil money came around to help reward Alaska's pioneers and to help them stay in the state. Well, those pioneers who are left now are in their 80s and their 90s. Baby boomers are not pioneers. So the advantage of getting rid of some of these exemptions are many. There are many. One of them, which we have learned of recently, we've got new software, point-of-sale software for our business. Well, we learned after a month or so that it can't handle Petersburg sales tax. This company has businesses in 50 states, all over the country, and we have about the most complicated sales tax exemptions they've ever seen. So we actually had to switch software again for a second time in a year. So I just wanted you to know how, when you figure your sales tax report as a business every year, every month, here's what you have to go through. The over 65 sales, the government sales, the out-of-town sales. But if you do labor on out-of-town equipment, you have to tax the labor but not the parts. Okay, anything over $1,200 not taxed. Anything for resale, anything from nonprofits, and then of course tax-free day. So to simplify our tax code would be a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I've added one person under the board, commission, and committee reports. Rick Braun, he's the chair of the land selection committee, and I asked him to come and talk about the RFP, his opinion on it for the comprehensive
Thank you,
plan.
Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. The Land Selection Committee has had a couple of meetings. We haven't done a lot here. A lot of people have been out of town and quite busy. Some other issues concerning that I'll get into later. We received maps from DNR showing the vacant, unappropriated, unreserved, or VUU lands within the borough. And we acquired some good aerial photos of these areas, and we started discussions about the various characteristics of each of the parcels. And we also found out that the borough was entitled to about 1,300, a little over 1,300 acres of land. There's like 18,000 acres of state land in the borough, and we're entitled to 10% of that, less the land that the city got before. So that came to about 1,300 acres. In order to select parcels that will benefit the borough in the future, we need selection criteria. What land characteristics are desired? What is the future for Petersburg in terms of industry, recreation, transportation, and energy? These are all questions that would be answered in our comprehensive plan. I would encourage the Assembly to move quickly to get the comprehensive plan started. I think the last plan that we did here in Petersburg was about 30 years ago. I participated in this plan. And my recommendation is that you seek proposals from professional planning firms, much like the ones we employed 30 years ago. You need people with a wide range of skills and knowledge: planners, economists, engineers, architects, and meeting facilitators, and writers, and as we've seen tonight, probably foresters and geologists as well. So I think it'd be very difficult to find people in Petersburg that have these skills, and it would also be hard to find that could dedicate the time. I'm sure there's people in this town that have these skills, but can they dedicate the time, and would they have the objective views that we need for somebody to put together this plan? So I would encourage you to send out RFPs and get proposals from professional firms for this work. Thank you.
Rick. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. There's no items on the consent agenda this evening. Report of other officers. We'll ask Representative Hannah Funt to come and give a report to us. And then after that, we'll take a short break.
Hi, I'm Hannah Funt. I'm the representative from the high school, the ASB, and I'm just here to give a report on what's been going on in the school lately. First, start with some academic stuff. We had 13 new members inducted into NHS this week, so that was really exciting. They had to have a certain academic standard and service, and so it was really cool to see that many students inducted. Yeah. And our Students of the Year, our Elks Students of the Year were chosen. They were Skipper Erickson and Abby Taylor, and so that was exciting. And our ASB had new elections that were held, and Skipper Erickson was elected our president, and we also chose other executive officers. Our track and field students came back this weekend from regionals, and it was very exciting. Just some things that happened. The girls took first, and the boys took a really close second. And some of our individual students that did very well were Isabel Ith, who was a region champion, and Ben Zarlango, and Billy Ware, Alan Jensen, and Abel Albach. They were all region champions. And let's see. The state qualifiers will be traveling to Anchorage this weekend to compete. So, yes. Baseball, they'll be traveling to Juneau this weekend, and then regions the next weekend in Sitka. And they just wanted to thank Parks and Rec for all the work they've done with the ball field and keeping that facility going. And they really appreciate it, and we do too. So, that's it.
Thank you, Hannah. That was an exciting track meet to go watch. There's no doubt about that.
It was really exciting.
It was fun. Okay, I think we'll take a 5-minute break if we could all muster back here in that length of time. SARA, Southern Southeast Regional Aquaculture Association. The Fish and Game is attempting to fast-track the repairs at Crystal Lake Hatchery so that an incubation room can be in place sometime this fall or early winter. In order to make this critical deadline, Fish and Game is seeking support for SARA to perform the rebuilds. So what we're asking is the insurance money goes straight to SARA, and then instead of going through DOT, and then it'll make the process faster. So we've sent a letter along those lines. Got a copy of an agreement on the medical center roof. The medical center and contractor Silverbow Construction have reached an agreement to remedy the deficiencies on the new roof of the medical center. The repair work will be completed this summer. It's going to include removing some of the metal that's been installed, and they have a good workforce come and perform the job. So that was good to hear. School board appointment to vacancies. The school board has appointed Megan Lister and Jay Lister to the board until the October 2014 municipal election. There is a sea otter workshop. Alaska Sea Grant and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service will provide a sea otter workshop to share results of their research in southern southeast Alaska. The workshop will focus on the interaction of sea otters with commercially important prey. Interested residents may attend the video conference here at the Assembly Chambers on Tuesday, May 20th at 8:30 a.m. There's been attorneys' fees awarded. Superior Court Judge Menendez has awarded attorney fees in the amount of $1,500 each to Petersburg and to the state regarding Juneau's claims against Petersburg and the local boundary commission regarding borough boundaries. Juneau continues its appeal in the Supreme Court, and that's going to be probably another, could be up to 10 months, I bet, before we know where our northern boundary is. So that makes things a little bit, confusing at times. But negotiations with SEPA. If there are no objections from the Assembly, I plan to assist the borough manager in the negotiations with SEPA regarding the dissolution of Thomas Bay Power Authority. I am very familiar with these issues and have been involved with the transition of the four-dam pool to SEPA from the onset. On the comprehensive plan, due to the great importance of a comprehensive plan for the community and the absence of several people from the May 5th meeting that could have provided more information, I believe the topic deserves further discussion and debate. So to assure there is adequate consideration given to this important subject, I will be placing the issuance of an RFP for help on a comprehensive plan back on the June 2nd agenda. Just for your information on my schedule with fishing, I will be here for sure the first meeting in June, and the first gillnet opening is June 15th, so we'll be back on the water. So I ask your permission to be vacant, be gone, I guess. There is no written manager's report
Nothing
this
from me
time.
this week.
This brings us to unfinished business, and first items there are ordinances for the third and final reading. First ordinance this evening is ordinance 2014-6, and that's an ordinance providing for Chapter 4.50 E911 Emergency Communications Fund of the Municipal Code and updating current language to reflect borough incorporation. The ordinance was amended by the Assembly on May 5th, 2014 to remove the under oath statement originally contained in section 4.50.040. So I'd entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2014-6 in its third and final reading.
So moved. I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by, was that you, Jay, that did it? By Member Gregor and seconded by Member Lagadakis. So any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
John.
Yes.
Kurt.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Bob.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Next ordinance for third and final reading this evening is ordinance 2014-7. And this is an ordinance adjusting the fiscal year 2014 budget for known changes. The ordinance was amended by the Assembly at the May 5th, 2014 meeting to provide for purchase of a new road grader in the current year budget. So I would entertain a motion to adopt 2014-07 in its third and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Walhuter to adopt ordinance 2014-7 in its third and final reading. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob?
Yes.
John?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
And Mark?
Yes. Ordinance 2014-7 passes 6-1. Okay, next item on this evening's agenda is ordinance for second reading. Ordinance 2014-08 is an ordinance providing for Chapter 4.60 of the Municipal Code, Parks and Recreation user fees, and updating current language to reflect borough incorporation. I would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2014-8 in its second reading.
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been motion's been made by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Gregor to adopt ordinance 2014-8 in its second reading. Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm confused about what do they mean non-resident and resident? What, resident of what?
Can you explain that, Donnie?
Yeah, we did make an adjustment to this now that's going for the borough rather than just area 1 versus the city of Petersburg. And so I believe in the ordinance it actually states what is a resident versus what is not a resident. Basically, I'm trying to pull it up fairly quickly, but the basic understanding is that any member of the borough is considered a resident, and any person that is not in the borough is considered a non-resident. We found that pretty much across the board, most of our non-resident usage usually came from those that were working from the fish cleaning cannery. Thank you, that's the word I was looking for. And so, a very small portion was actually coming from outside of Area 1. And so it seemed like a pretty fair way to go.
Does that answer your question, Nancy?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Donnie. Any other questions or discussion on ordinance 2014-8? Okay, seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
And Nancy?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2014-8 passes unanimously in its second reading. Next ordinance up for discussion this evening is ordinance 2014-09, an ordinance providing for Chapter 13.12 camping/recreation areas of the municipal code and updating current language to reflect borough incorporation. Entertain a motion to adopt this in its second reading.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Walhooter to adopt ordinance 2014-09. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor, under section .040 of that ordinance, it says here that the sole person that can allow camping or not camping on any controlled borough or property is solely the Parks and Rec Director. I have a problem with that. I think the borough ought to be included in that.
So
Because we don't have a Parks and Rec Board anymore that he can bounce those off of. I'm uncomfortable with just one person making that decision.
So where's this written? It's a 13.
It's under 13.12.040. They took the city council out of it and then just added Parks and Rec Director solely. And I would like to add back in Borough Assembly and has to get the approval of both for that sort of permitting.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Obviously, this is really up to the Assembly. The reason this was done was we get these requests for somebody that wants to camp, Boy Scouts or something like that. And rather than having to take it to the Assembly, we thought staff would approve it. But again, this is one of those, if the Assembly wants that authority, we can leave it that way.
So I could see where that could be a problem if it has to go through 3 readings to get a decision.
Wouldn't take 3 readings, but
could take 2 weeks.
Potentially.
So, thank you, Steve. So, Kurt, what you're proposing is to amend it back where 13.12.040 A and B are back in the ordinance?
I would like to see the Borough Assembly involved in that, seeing how there's not a board of directors anymore, or they don't have a board, I mean, not, you know, they just don't have a board that can bounce things off them anymore.
Right. Cindy?
Mr. Mayor, I would recommend that we include language that says that we would develop a schedule based on group size and that the Parks and Rec director would have the discretion of whether or not to allow the group, and then we would have some controls over it. I would like to see us have a Parks and Rec advisory committee back again, and so I share Kurt's concern. But absent that, I think that coming up with some criteria instead of having to come to the assembly each time might be a more easily manageable situation.
So I guess we need a motion then with the specific language that we want to replace or put in here. Kurt, what would be your...
I'd like to say what she said, but... No, I mean, I remember we've only had one incident when we've had a group of people that wanted to camp out there, and that was the paddlers going down to the Chief Shake's rededication, and they gave us weeks in advance. It seemed to me that was a pretty easy decision to make as an assembly, and I think most of the time it would be. So,
Mr. Mayor. Yes, Donnie.
Yeah, Council Assemblymember Wohlhuter actually is correct on that. There has been only one since he's been on the assembly. There has been two in the 4 years that I've been the director, and the last one was the Girl Scouts who came to me about a week in advance. I mean, those have been the only two that we've ever actually had anybody ask for permission to do so, just as information.
So it's not something that happens frequently. Bob?
Yep. If we were to put criteria in there, what would be your recommendation for the criteria?
My recommendation, I mean, off the top of my head, would definitely have to do with group size. I mean, there are public residences very close to that that would be a concern. Noise regulations, I mean, making sure that, you know, that people aren't having huge parties there after 10 o'clock, so that way, you know, the residents can actually, you know, sleep at night. That would be helpful. You know, fires out by midnight. I think there would be a fairly large list of things that we would want to have in there. But I think most of those can be discussions directly with the group as the times come up.
Could we propose, as part of Cindy's, to allow for the next reading to come back with a criteria, some brief criteria that we would use, that could be used to address this question?
I think we do have one more reading, so
Yeah.
We don't have to amend this totally now. And if we had some language in front of us at the next meeting that we could vote on, but we need to pass it in this second reading if it's going to get to the third.
Mr. Mayor,
Cindy?
I would remove my objection if we would consider this discussion. It sounds like it's not imminent, that we have hordes of groups coming in that need a decision on it now. So if we could consider developing some additional criteria and amend the ordinance sometime in the future,
Yeah.
I would be comfortable with voting for it.
Jay, did you have a comment?
I guess I'm hesitant by nature to want to, as an assembly, decide who and who cannot camp at Sandy Beach. I feel much more comfortable deferring that to Parks and Rec, because that's my reservation I've got with this.
Okay. Any more discussion on direction we should go? I kind of feel like Jay. I mean, it's unfortunate, in my opinion, that we don't have a Parks and Rec board anymore, but that happened, and I guess we could reinstate it if we, at some point. But for now, I think I'd trust the Parks and Rec director to do a good job with who he allows in there. But if the assembly wants to put some criteria in there, we can sure come up with some language for the third reading. Kathy, what would be the proper way to do that? Could we vote on it like it is now, and then we probably shouldn't discuss it outside of the assembly chambers?
I just was wondering though why that the assembly wants to get involved with administration. I think it'd be cleaner if you do just bring it to the borough assembly instead of putting criteria in your ordinance. It's more of a administrative type thing instead of a, law.
Okay, value your opinion. Any more, Kurt?
Just one last comment here, Mark, and then I'll let it go here. But, I mean, I don't know if I'm channeling John Hogue or not, but, that was always going to be his intention, was these sort of decisions, if they're not going to be made by an elected board, then it should come before the assembly to be decided upon. I mean, not every little jot and tittle, but, some large group if they want to come in, or that sort of thing is all. So I'd feel more comfortable if we just put some language in there that if a group wants to come and if they've got 2 weeks to wait, they should plan on it if it needs to go that way. If I don't get, if you guys don't vote the other way. I'm only one vote, by the way.
So that should be in form of a formal motion, and we should have a second on it before we're even discussing it, so I kind of overstepped that, so.
Okay, then maybe I'll make a formal motion here that we should maybe put back in Borough Assembly may allow camping on borough-owned and controlled properties. See, they took out the city council.
Right,
if
so
they were going to change the language to borough, then it should be Borough Assembly instead of Parks and Rec Director. Is all I'm saying.
Okay, so you want to add the language back in that was crossed out in the first sentence of the first paragraph.
But
that
it's
says
Borough Assembly instead, and then cross out Parks and Rec Director.
So you like that word, the Borough Assembly and Parks and Recreation Director? Or how would it, I mean, I'm not a ordinance writer.
Just a point of clarification, it looks like there are 2 places in that paragraph that you would want to make that substitution. Am I correct?
Well, as for the fees, I think that he could impose a fee. I don't think that should be up to us because he's the one that would handle the monies and not so much us. I looked at that too, and I thought about that. But the only thing is without a board direction, I mean, I'd like to have some oversight.
Okay, so the motion is to change the language in the first sentence and add back in Borough Assembly and Parks and Recreation. Is that correct?
Scratch Parks and Rec Director.
So it's going to be the sole
may allow camping on borough-owned and controlled property, including the Sandy Beach Recreational. Is how that would read.
The Borough Assembly.
Yeah.
May allow camping. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're all squared away with what the language was going to be.
I have a question, and when we vote on this now, if we vote in favor of this, or say we vote against this change, are we voting down the entire second reading of the ordinance?
No, this is an amendment to the.
It would just be the amendment.
Just to the motion.
Just the amendment.
Amendment to the main motion where we're on the second reading of the camping permit.
And then we will again.
Then we will go back to that. So is there any more discussion on the amendment made by Member Walhooter to change the language where it states the Borough Assembly, and then cross out Parks and Rec Director, may allow camping on borough-owned or controlled property, including in the Sandy Beach Recreation Area. So everybody good on the language before you?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just a point of order here. Do I need a second on that motion?
Yeah, you should have had a
Okay.
second.
I'll
Okay,
second.
motion made by Member Walhooter, seconded by Member Logadakis. We've had all our discussion, and maybe we're a little bit out of order.
Okay.
I think we've got the
Limited by
job
4
done,
minutes.
so.
That was my 4 minutes.
Any more, yeah, sorry about that. Any more discussion? Okay, this vote is on the amendment. Clerk, call the roll.
Jay,
No.
Bob,
No.
Cindy,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Kurt,
Yes.
Nancy.
No.
No. So did I get the tally right? That the amendment fails 4-3?
That's correct.
Okay, now we're back to the main motion, and the main motion is, if I find my spot here, to adopt ordinance 2014-8 in its second reading. Is there any more discussion or amendments on this main motion? Will clerk call the roll?
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and Jay.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2014-08 passes unanimously in its second reading and moves us on to ordinance 2014-09, an ordinance providing for chapter 13.12 camping/recreation areas of the municipal code and updating current language to reflect borough incorporation. I would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2014-9 in its second reading.
Didn't we just do that?
We did that one?
We did. Yeah. Shake it off. We're
I
good.
thought
We're
we
good.
did the user fees, and now we're on to 2014-09.
We're on E.
Oh, okay.
User
well.
fees passed.
Got it.
Shake it off. We're good.
Okay, I will. Ordinance 2014-10, an ordinance adopting the budget and setting the millage rates for the fiscal year July 1st, 2014 through June 30th, 2015 as amended. The ordinance was amended by the Assembly on May 5th, 2014 to address motor pool fund needs. The ordinance has been further amended for the motor pool to reflect the purchase of a wheelchair accessible van for Mountain View Manor, which we addressed earlier. So entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2014-10 in its second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Walhooter to adopt ordinance 2014-10. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Oh, John had his hand up. No, John had his hand up. I just butted in. Go ahead.
Okay.
I was looking that way. Okay, John, you're first.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Mayor, first thing I'd like to say is my no vote on 07, I thought it was this one, so that should be changed to a yes. You don't have to. It already went through.
I think it's passed,
That's
so it's
okay.
kind of hard to go back.
But, yeah, no problem. But I'm still really concerned about our spending, and would hope that, you know, a lot of the changes we said we couldn't make this year because there wasn't a timely manner. But I'm not going to vote for this this budget because I think we're spending way too close to what we're bringing in, and we're not saving for our future. And I would like to see us make cuts next year that would give us about $1 million latitude. I don't know if that can happen, but that's my goal. And if we need to give people notice, schools, hospital, all the departments, and I think the schools are doing an excellent job, and the departments are doing an excellent job, but I just don't think we can afford what we're spending, and we need to cut back so we can pay for the services and the things we desperately need, like repairs of school, the hospital, rebuilding the police station. We don't have any money put aside for any of that, and the contingency we have, the leeway we have at the end of this budget, will probably all be spent. So we're not having any leeway. So that would be my reason for a no vote on this.
Okay, Kurt.
Mr. Mayor, pertaining to the millage rates, how we set millage rates in the future, I would like us to look into the overtaxation of some of these people that have absolutely no services whatsoever that have been paying 10 mil on their properties, like those folks out at Frederick Point East. I've had long conversations with them. They've been paying 10 mil. They get no sewer, no water, no electrical, no police, no fire, no garbage. And I believe that's probably we need to look into that. So I told them I'd mention that tonight. That's going to be on the radar for this next, when we go through this again, so we can look into that and rectify some of these inappropriate charges.
Okay. Any more discussion on ordinance 2014-10? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob.
Yes.
Cindy.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
John.
No.
And Kurt.
Yes.
Okay, it passes 6-1. Ordinance 2014-10 in its second reading. Brings us to new business. Ordinance 2014-11, an ordinance placing the question of exemption from the Alaska Public Officials Financial Disclosure Law on the October 7th, 2014 municipal election ballot. Entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Havlicek, seconded by Member Walhooter to adopt 2014-11 in its first reading. Discussion? Just, I think it would be a worthy thing to have on the ballot. We had it before the state election to become a borough, and I think it would put a lot more people, interested in being on in these positions, selected positions. So that's my only comment. Clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
And Bob?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2014-11 passes unanimously. Next item under new business, item B, is authorization to amend the professional services agreement with MRV Architects for municipal building renovations to include design development phase at $207,826, construction documents phase at $278,818, and bidding phase at $20,010. The $506,654 proposal reflects expense for the police station portion at $337,770 and the municipal offices portion at $168,884. The proposal does not include fees estimated at $14,500 to assist with 9/11 and communications system. Additional information regarding the proposal not included in the meeting packet is available for review at the clerk's office. Would entertain a motion to authorize the city manager to move forward with the professional services agreement with MRV.
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Logadakis, seconded by Member Gregor to authorize the manager to move forward with this expenditure. And this money, Steve, would all be coming from grant funds that we've received already?
Yes, sir.
To get this project for this building basically shovel-ready.
That's the plan. We would use the money we've already received for both planning as well as construction to get the design and construction documents done. Then some site work. We'd remove the old Mitkoff Motors building, do the remediation under it, and have that ready to go as well.
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to ask Chief Swihart if the fees or the city manager or the borough manager, if the fees for the 911 and communication system will be coming from the phone receipts that you had talked about at a prior meeting.
If I may, Kelly, possibly. Okay. One of the reasons we didn't have MRV include that is we have another vendor that's a little more expert on those areas that we're looking at using their services. That's their expertise.
Okay.
Bob?
That was one of my questions Cindy had. Yeah. The second one was, can you be a little more specific about the grant money that we have on board to pay for this?
We received a grant for $350,000 for planning purposes towards this facility. We then received $1 million this year and $2.5 million the year before, and a reallocation of money from the fire hall in the amount of 1.4. Thank you very much, 1.4 million. So the idea behind it is, while the full construction budget is not funded, to keep the project moving forward, get the design documents done. It also actually helps with the legislature when we can say, as Mark said, as the mayor said, shovel ready, here's the design. The farther you get down that design process, the more accurate your construction numbers get. So.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any more discussion on the authorization to?
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah.
Mr. Manager, a question in terms of what is our total shortfall in terms of from now till completion at this point?
Okay. If we
ballpark, of course.
Yes. Yeah. We are roughly $4.7 million short for everything. That's assuming the prices stay firm. The architect originally forecasted an increase of 5% in costs if we didn't start the project by about March.
I recall.
At this point, the assumption is we will not be starting the project in March because it was not fully funded. So we would assume there'd be some price creep, so that 4.7 million might go up. I don't have a number beyond that.
Thanks.
Did that answer your question, Jay?
Most certainly.
Steve, since most of what we have are grant funds, is there a drop dead date that if we don't start, the state takes it back?
Usually there's about a 5-year period which you can ask for extensions on. On a project of this size and of its complexity, I can't speak in guarantees, but if we got to that point, I think we could ask to extend this. We're spending the oldest money we have first, which was the planning grant.
All right.
And so, the other grants are, at max 2 years old at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Cindy?
I just wanted to make the comment that we did take advantage at the harbor dedication. We had Representative Christ Tompkins here and also an aide for Lisa Murkowski, and we took them through the police station to show them what the situation was and our concern. And while it's not a guarantee, they did let us know that they would be willing to help us look for grant funds to complete the project.
Also, Sam Keto, the third, was
very
got a
good.
tour.
Yeah, just about all of the legislators that have been through town have been toured through the building, and they're kind of appalled at its condition. So, but we all know money is getting tighter.
Right.
But we did get another $1 million this year, and with the spreadsheet that you've sent around, another $1 million. If we got that next year, we'd be fairly close. I mean,
At this point, unless the Assembly gives us further direction, we are not planning on bonding the remainder. That while we do have funds that we could throw at it ourselves, it's still not enough to finish the job. Again, we'd like to get the design and construction documents done, get this thing shovel ready. In the meantime, continue to lobby, as well as Kelly and others. We're kind of on the look for other grants beyond just what the legislature does to, potentially some of the communications equipment, and that's some big price tag items. If we could find a grant for those, that helps us maybe offset some of those construction creep costs.
Absolutely.
But at this point, unless directed by the Assembly, we're assuming no bond, and we'll go back to the legislature again next year.
okay. Any more discussion on this item? Will the clerk call the roll?
John,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
and Cindy.
Yes.
Okay, gives authorization to the manager to go into professional services agreement with MRB for the next step, getting the plans ready. Okay, authorization to join with the City of Kupreanof in sending a letter to the University of Alaska President Patrick Gamble requesting the university suspend the finalization of timber sale contracts for the Wrangell Narrows East and South Mitkoff Island development and disposal plans. Dave Beebe, councilman for the City of Kupreanof, has provided considerable information on the timber harvest, the proposed joint letter, the operation summaries of the 2 timber sales showing location, the May 2nd, 2014 City of Kupreanof letter to the university, and the March 13th, 2014 Department of Fish and Game letter have been included in the meeting packet. Other information regarding this matter was available at the city clerk's office, or the borough clerk's, and still is. I will read the letter, the proposed joint letter that was drafted by Kupreanof City Council, I'm assuming. To the University of Alaska, President Patrick Gamble, regarding Wrangell Narrows East and South Mitkoff Island development and disposal plans. Dear University of Alaska President and Board of Regents, the Kupreanof City Council and the Petersburg Borough Assembly request that you suspend the finalization of timber sales contracts for 2 University of Alaska timber sales in southeast Alaska on Mitkoff Island. Specifically, the sales are known as the South Mitkoff Island and Wrangell Narrows East competitive timber sale development and disposal plans. The reason for our urgent request is that we will be addressing these 2 sales during the Monday, May 19th, Petersburg Borough Assembly meeting. This late date of discussion is due to the failure of the Division of Forestry to provide timely notice of the receipt of the detailed plan of operations for these sales. Consequently, the public has only recently been provided with this new information concerning the sales impacts, which merit careful consideration. The Board of Regents approved development and disposal plans authorizing 2 timber sales in the absence of a meaningful public process. These timber sales will likely result in the increase of severe landslide potential, loss of critical deer winter range, and visual impacts to the Wrangell Narrows Scenic Byway, which are but some of the issues of vital importance to our borough's rural residents and elected representatives. Further, we invite you to enter into dialogue with affected borough residents consistent with your land management stewardship development guidelines, which recognizes that the university commonly holds additional public workshops and community forums to discuss such development issues as local impacts. To date, there have been no such workshops or forums, and given the importance of these issues, we believe they warrant more information and consideration. And the signatories on this would be Mayor Dan Atinas, the mayor of the city of Kupernoff, and myself as mayor of the Petersburg Borough. So, discussion.
We need a motion.
Need a motion to,
Mr. Mayor,
authorize
I would
this letter.
move to go along with the, have you sign the letter, the Kupernoff letter.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion been made by Member Haverlick, seconded by Member Greger to authorize us to join with the city of Kupernoff in sending this letter that I just read to the university. Now discussion. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, as I stated earlier today on borough businesses, I am not anti-logging by any means whatsoever. So I don't want any of my logging friends to construe what I'm about to say as anti-logging. What caught me on this letter was here, we believe they warrant more information and consideration. That is the sole reason why I would vote for us to go in that direction, so that we'd have time to consider other options like it was presented to us tonight. Not necessarily the deer habitat, but maybe better use for that land, such as what Dave Kissinger mentioned. I think that should be looked into. I think there should be other things that we should explore instead of hastily just throwing the timber away, sending it overseas, and not keeping those jobs in Petersburg, and then us dealing with the fallout. I do not want it on my head if we have a landslide someplace and one of my citizens gets killed. So that's the only reason I'm going to do it for right now.
Okay, John?
So, Mayor, I have similar comments to Kurt, that I believe we're taking all the liability and getting no economic benefit from it. Mostly when the logging operations occur in the recent times, like the helicopter companies out of Portland, they bring in their own loggers. Very few of them ever come to town, so about the only one who makes a buck on it are the bars. At the most. And then all the logs go overseas. So I don't see any benefit to it, just all liability. And as Kurt said, we've seen it in Oso. Wrangell's Road got wiped out with the logging. Same thing on Prince of Wales. I don't want to be stuck as a borough with the bill and no benefit.
Any more comments or discussion?
If I may.
Oh, Jay?
Since it seems popular, I'll give a similar disclaimer as Kurt gave. I have a strong background in the extraction industry, mining in Montana. So my logging friends listening can know where I stand. Here's where I get stuck on this, and I think some great points have been raised on both sides of this tonight and over the last 2 weeks when I've been listening to members of the community. But where I get stuck is, in particular, on the Keene, the one adjacent to Keene Channel, is that is a residential neighborhood. There are year-round residents living there on the Mitkoff side, directly adjacent to that. And on the Kupernoff Keene Channel side, there's year-round residents. And I thought to myself, if this was happening in a place of year-round residents, such as Sandy Beach, as an assembly, I would hope we would oppose that sale, because year-round residents in our borough, I don't think they should have that. That'd be Severson subdivision, adjacent to or in view of Scow Bay, etc. And I think we owe it to the residents of that neighborhood, which it is, to oppose that land sale for timber use there right now.
Okay. John, did you, or any more comments? Cindy?
I actually live across from the Tonka timber sale and have been listening to it all summer, and so have the other permanent residents that live in that area. However, we bought our property knowing that timber sales existed in that area. You can see old cuts, and knew that there would be future sales. So even though I don't always appreciate getting awakened at 5 o'clock in the morning, which I mentioned to Mr. Parker of the Forest Service, I understood that that would be a consequence of living in the place that I live. I could not support sending a letter as it is written. There are several things that do cause me concern. I would like to know that the university did consider the slide hazard. I would support providing a letter that said we would request that in the future the university would have an improved and more open public process. It's really difficult to know what they did consider and what they didn't consider. And I think that Mr. Wood made a really good point about the liability concerns, and that was not something that I had considered or had thought about before. So those 3 points would be something that I would be willing to speak to, but the letter as it's written, I don't think that I would vote for.
Any more comments, Bob?
I looked at the comments that the Habitat Division provided, and they were concerned more about blowdown. There was one anonymous fish stream out there. There was really no other, and they were concerned about maintaining the facilities of which they had put money into and so forth. But there were no other major comments on their part that they provided to the university. This was on sports fish now, ADF and G. I looked for Habitat Division, I couldn't find it. But going back, I've read all this information, and I'm pretty much in the same boat Cindy is that well, there's a lot of generalities here, but there's not a lot of specifics here. I've looked at their timber sale. There should be a few more details to it than I've seen. I could support a letter that would ask them to look at, to provide some more details, but I don't think I can support the letter as written.
Okay, any more discussion?
I would just like to comment for my logging friends that I agree with Kurt and Jay that I'm not against logging, but I think we warrant more information and consideration. I'd also like to point out that it has been logged at Sandy Beach, logged years ago. I have stumps on my lot and you don't even notice it because it's grown up, but and I am fond of loggers.
Okay.
But I don't have an issue with signing this letter.
Any more comments, Mr. Walter?
Just for the record here, I'm not real thrilled about the way this letter is written either. I mean, but the only thing I'm concerned about is that I would like to see more information and different options. So if that could be somehow conveyed, I mean, that would satisfy me anyway.
Any more discussion on that issue? I guess that leaves me to comment. I'm not going to vote for this, just one, because of the way the letter's written. Two, because I think we need another source of revenue coming into town, even if this is not a big timber sale. And listening to Jason Anderson talk about the way the logging might be performed, helicopter logging, it's not going to be a clear cut. I find that even a better reason to not support this letter. We've got a potential mill wanting to come to town, and I don't know if it'll ever come to fruition, but would support 30 jobs. We have 12 small mills around the area, and to make a statement that we don't support timber harvest, I don't think is good. So that's my position on it. Is there any more comments, any more discussion before we vote? Will the clerk call the roll?
John,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
Bob,
No.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cindy,
No.
Mark.
No. The motion carries 4-3, we will sign the letter and, along with Kupernoff. Okay, communications. I see none. Is there any communications by any assembly members? See none. Assembly discussion items. None listed. I guess recognitions, I had one, but Hannah Funt already talked about the track meet. That was pretty neat. The boys were behind Sitka by 2.5 points, and the coach said you could relate that to losing a 100-point basketball game by a free throw. So it could have went either way. If they would have flopped to 5th and 4th position, they would have beat Sitka and taken first too. But got a lot of good competitors going to state this week, so that's pretty fun to see. That being said, if there's no more recognitions, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.